Paragraph 3. The processionary caterpillar illustrates how an insect species relies on instinct in its daily routine. What would the follow-on to that be? U. The caterpillars line up end to end, walking the leader's silk line? Probably not. As they leave the nest, one caterpillar becomes the leader who spins. No, I don't think that's necessarily a follow-on. Q. Dozens of caterpillars nest in a tree during the day, then leave together at night. Okay, not sure that's the best follow-on. R. After feeding, the caterpillars also use a silken road. No, I don't think so. Hopefully it will be T. T. The processionary's instinct is so strong that if a person were to pick up one end of the silk and bring it around to join the other end, creating a closed circle, the caterpillars might travel around the loop for days without changing course. Well, that is a very good example illustrating how the processionary caterpillar relies on instinct. In fact, T refers to the instinct mentioned in the main sentence, and it says it's so strong, emphasizing how strong it is, that it gives this example that the caterpillar would just essentially chase its own tail like a dog, round and round and round, or chase the silk circle. So what's the best follow-on to that? The other caterpillars line up? No, I don't think that fits. As they leave the nest, well, we don't quite know who they is yet and what nest, so I'm not sure S follows. Dozens of caterpillars nest in a tree during the day, then leave together at night in search of food. Possibly. After feeding, caterpillars use the silken road to help them return to the nest. So between these four, which is most likely to follow T? Well, it looks like Q is the best follow-on because that seems to introduce a process or a sequence of events here between Q, U, S, and R. And that begins with dozens of caterpillars nest in a tree during the day, then leave together at night in search of food. And the follow-on to Q would most likely be S. As they leave the nest, one caterpillar becomes the leader who spins and lays out a silk line as it moves along. And then between U and R, we're down to a 50-50 choice again. It's likely U is the follow-on because the other caterpillars line up end to end and walk on the leader's silk line. And we just learned at the end of S that there is one leader who lays out a silk line, as it leaves the nest from the day going out to search for food. Each one enforcing the rope by laying down its own silk as it passes over. R. After feeding, the caterpillars also use the silken road to help them return to their nest. So now R concludes by saying not only do they use the silken road to leave the nest, but they follow it in coming back to the nest as well after they found their food. So I like the order of this paragraph. We have an insect species that relies on its instinct. The instinct is so strong that it will chase itself around in circles following a silk line it lays out, and it outlines sort of a daily routine that dozens of these caterpillars nest in a tree during the day, then they leave. One leader lays out the trail, others follow that trail and reinforce it, and then when they're done, they follow that trail back again. And that leaves us with our ordering of the paragraph. But as I look at it currently, I think I want to change one item in our paragraph ordering, seeing it all in position at this point. The processionary caterpillar illustrates how an insect species relies on instinct in its daily routines. 4 of the 5 of the sentences are illustrating that. Q, S, U, and R. They're indicating how the caterpillars were nesting in the tree. They left the tree to go feed. They followed a silk line. Everybody reinforced that. And then they used that silken road to return to the nest. T, however, I placed originally as the first follow-on sentence. I think that is wrong. Because T, the processionary's instinct is so strong that if a person were to pick up one end of the silk line, bring it around and join the other end, isn't so much a follow-on to an illustration of how the insect relies on instinct in its daily routine. It could possibly fit there, but I think T is better as the final sentence in this paragraph. So the first follow-on would actually immediately go into the illustration of the insect's instinct, and T would kind of sum it up with this new idea that it's so strong, even more strong, and part of the reason why I put it at the end is it's so strong implies that it's even more strong than Q, S, U, and R examples before it, that if a person were to pick up one end of the silk line, bring it around to join the other end, it would follow that circle around and around without changing course. So now I think our paragraph is in pretty good order. That is the ordering we'll go with. So let's move on to paragraph 4. Paragraph 4. Helen Suzman was a member of the South African Parliament from 1953 to 1993. Let's find the first follow-on sentence. However, she was given numerous other human rights awards. Well, not sure what other rights awards that would be. There should have been some mention in the first place, which they weren't in the first sentence. So I'll eliminate R as a first follow-on sentence to the topic sentence. How about Q? Despite this international recognition of her work, well, I'm not sure what international recognition is alluded to in the first topic sentence, because that sentence just tells us she was a member of parliament for about 40 years in South Africa. So let's look at T. In recognition of her personal efforts, Suzman was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, we don't know what her personal efforts were in the topic sentence, so I would not use that for the first follow-on. How about you? An outspoken critic of apartheid during those 40 years, well, there were 40 years mentioned in the first sentence, she was often the only one to voice her protest against the policies of racial segregation by the South African government, which would make sense since she was in Parliament. So I'm going to put you as a very likely fit for our first follow-on sentence to the main topic sentence. Let's just check S. At last, Suzman saw her dream fulfilled. Well, at last suggests it comes at the end, so this is probably toward the end of the paragraph. So I like you as our first follow-on sentence. Helen Suzman was a member of South African Parliament from 1953 to 93. She was an outspoken critic of apartheid during those 40 years, those being 53 to 93. And she was the only one to voice protest against the policies of segregation by the South African government. Again, linking to the topic sentence that she was a member of the South African Parliament. So what would follow you? However, she was given numerous other human rights awards. Well, again, we weren't told of any human rights awards in the first place, so that can't be right. Q, despite this international we weren't told about international recognition of her work, so we can't be following with Q. How about T? In recognition of her personal efforts, Suzman was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 different times, but she never won. Well, that sounds like it might fit, and that might be one of the human rights awards the later sentences are referring to. And let's just check S again. At last, Suzman saw her dream fulfilled with the decision of South. Okay, that again looks like it's toward the end in some type of concluding sentence. So we have U and T. She was an outspoken critic of apartheid, and in recognition of her efforts, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, but never won. Well, now we're down to R, Q, and S. R, however, she was given numerous other human rights awards. Well, that's an excellent fit with T to follow on because it begins with a contrasting transition. However, although she never won the Nobel Prize, she was given other human rights awards. So the human rights awards follow quite naturally from the Nobel Peace Prize in sentence T prior to that, and honorary degrees from several universities, including Oxford, Harvard, and Brandeis. So that fits nicely, and we're now narrowed the scrambled paragraphs down to a 50-50 choice between Q and S for the 4th and 5th follow-on sentences. What is the best fit? Q. Despite this international recognition of her work, Suzman was largely unsuccessful during most of her career in her efforts to defeat apartheid. Well, that's a nice fit. The transition word, despite this international recognition, and that international recognition was the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize nominations, the various awards and degrees from Oxford, Harvard, and Brandeis, which are all outside of South Africa in Great Britain and the U.S. So despite these, or this international recognition, which is what this refers to in sentence R and T, Sussman was largely unsuccessful during most of her career in her efforts to defeat apartheid. So that's a nice contrasting transition again. And that only leaves S, which also fits quite nicely because that is the sentence we mentioned before, would probably be a concluding sentence. And it says, at last, in the sequence, Sussman saw her dream fulfilled with the decision of the South African Parliament to dismantle the apartheid system, and she retired from public life. So I like the order of this paragraph. We are told that Helen Sussman was a member of Parliament for 40 years, from 53 to 93. During those 40 years, she fought apartheid. In recognition of that effort, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, never won it, but was given honorary degrees instead. And despite that recognition, she was not successful in fighting apartheid, until at last, finally, she saw her dream come true when apartheid was abolished. So that is an ordering I like, and let's move on to our final paragraph.